Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today we are going to stumble through contributing to open source software with some Git branching and all sorts of fun stuff, right? So, what we're going to do today is we're going to be using this repo. It can be any repo for all intents and purposes, but I have a couple changes in mind for this one. So this is the Red Hat Public Sector Workshop repository that turns into this website used by a lot. We fork it ourselves at Fierce Software. Either way, what we need to do first is fork this into our own account. What that means is it's going to create a copy of it in our own account that we can modify without having write permissions on the main origin. So now that we have our own sort of sandbox, what we can do is create a new branch, all right? So the idea with this branching strategy is that for every feature, sort of feature, encapsulation of a feature, or major change, notable change, you want to create a new branch. Easier to track, easier to revert, so on and so forth. So what we want to do is from this docs branch, which is the default, traditionally it's master, but this one is docs, we are going to create a new one called KMRFE font. Awesome. And create. Alrighty. So now we have a new branch in our own fork. Great. What we need to do before we can move forward is install Git, right? I already have it installed for speed purposes, but use your favorite package manager, throw it into your terminal, you got it, great. Now that we have Git installed with the user that we're going to use to modify things, what we need to do first is set a bit of configuration, right? And we'll just globally set this. We need to set our name and our email. Great. Now we have that set. What we also need to do is set up our SSH keys so that we can, whenever we make changes here on our local machine, which is a brand new Fedora box, we need to have authentication means to do so. What we are going to use are SSH keys. I already have some generated. Is in your home directory traditionally under your .ssh folder. If you do have some keys, there'll be IDRSA and IDRSA.pub for your public key. If you don't have some, you can do SSH keygen, do a type of RSA and a byte size of 49.6, answer a couple questions, and you'll have the same files as well. Now what we need to do is actually spit out the contents of that public key. The public key, not your private key. The private key is what you want to keep secret. Don't show that. Don't upload it anywhere. The ID_RSA file, don't touch it. What you can share, what you're supposed to share, is this public key. Should start with SSH-RSA. We want to go into our GitHub account and add a new SSH key under settings, right? So this is just a temporary key, paste that in. Great, now what we've done there is we have a set of keys that authenticates our identity on our local machine, and we gave our public version to GitHub. Now, basically, with the public version and my private version, whenever I use it, it's going to know that it's me, and if it's an imposter otherwise, right? So, in very simple terms. Alright, so we have our keys set up. Great. What we want to do now is clone this repository locally. I like to make a working directory. Just put your projects in there, whatever. And what we'll do is git clone and pop in that repo. So this will take a little moment to grab all the files. What we'll do in the meantime is grab Hugo. Hugo is a static site generator that is used for this website. We're going to click on Linux actually, because we're going to install it here. And so for Fedora, we'll actually grab a little bit more of a more recent version of the Hugo package with this third-party repository, because we trust them, right? Sudo that. We'll go ahead and enable it. Yep. Great. So we have the repository cloned down to our local machine. We have Hugo almost installed. Let's do sudo dnf install Hugo, or whatever your package manager of choice. That will install in the background. Great, we have Hugo ready to rock and roll. Wonderful. So let's change directories into our cloned repository. Now, the docs directory, or the docs branch rather, the docs branch, as I mentioned earlier, is the default branch. What we'll want to do is check out the branch that we're going to use. So let's do that with rmrfe font. Awesome. Alright, so now that we've switched to our branch that we created earlier for this font awesome feature, what we can do is add the file. This is actually from a previous pull request that I had. It was a kind of a bit of a monster, so I closed it. And now I practice better branching strategies. Instead of dumping a lot of things into one massive pull request that is easy to run into merge conflicts with and so on and so forth, breaking things out into a more sane branching strategy like this is a little bit easier to track and a little bit easier to collaborate with people on. So this is the file that I'm looking for. We'll go ahead and grab that. So this is going in layout shortcodes fa.html. So use your favorite text editor or whatever. I'll use Nano for simplicity's sake. fa.html. Now this will add a little bit of a shortcode functionality to Hugo. With that, we can add font awesome icons wherever we want on the work shop page. So now let's go ahead and just clear and test the crunching of this markdown, of the layouts, and so on and so forth. So Hugo just took all that source and compiled HTML documents for us, which is great. And it's running a test server at this location. Let's go ahead and check it out. Hey, look, it looks very similar. Shucks, in fact, it is the same as this, right? Except it also has that font awesome shortcodes. So what we want to do is go back and use this as a bit of an example, right? So this is an example workshop here. We've got a stock of shortcodes documented. Let's open up a new terminal, switch into our working directory, and this is going to be in the content folder for Hugo specific sites. And code's great. So what we'll do is just copy something that looks good. Nice and simple. Well, I guess the figure is pretty simple. All right. We'll scoot down to figure. So we want to grab from figure past to example output. Great. Alright, so something to make note of is that while we have this Hugo development server running in the background, we are going to make a change. So I just went through, made some considerate changes to this documentation to give it a little example and so on and so forth. As soon as I save this, what we should see is in this other tab, Hugo will kind of recrunch that file. Alright, so it detected a change, and it went ahead and wrote it. Alright, excellent. So it also reloads live, which is also kind of convenient. So now we can see our changes here. So the Font Awesome shortcode allows you to, there's a little link for examples of the icons, can be used in the following ways, so on and so forth. Well, there is a little error there, isn't there? Let's go ahead and change that out. Alright, there we go. Kind of had to manually reload that time, but that's alright. So, we have the examples. We could do a couple edits, like maybe add some line breaks and kind of clean things up, I suppose. But either way, that's outside the scope of this specific branch and feature, right? So, we have the new feature. We have documentation in place. That's all we want to do with this feature. We're not going to edit the content otherwise to do so. Now, what we want to do is we want to add the changes, right? We could add the specific changes or specific files rather, but instead of going through each one and adding it, what we can do is just add everything, and it will add all the changed files. Now we want to add a little commit message, right? So this is going to say added blanked out for a second. Now it'll say that we've changed 2 files, there are a couple insertions, so on and so forth. Your commit strategy can get a little bit more intense than this. Maybe you would want to make a commit per file changed, or per general block of file change, per stanza, whatever the case may be. However it is easiest for you to track. Either way, for speed purposes, we're just adding one little bit of a commit between the 2 files because it's still pretty easy between 2 files, right? Alright, so we've commit this, and now we need to push. Alright, so what has happened here is that my account is locked down. It does not authenticate to HTTPS because I have two-factor authentication. So because of that, I need to switch to the Git protocol to use SSH keys, right? So what we want to do is remote. Is there an update? Yep. Update origin. And we'll make sure. Alright, so we just replaced origin there. Great. Let's try to push that anyway. And in case that messes up, again, Git is very helpful. And will help troubleshoot you along the way. Great, so we had the SSH key, we installed the GitHub, it knows it's us, we authenticated just fine, wonderful. So now what we want to do is check our docs branch. So it's even with the mainline docs. Great, let's check this branch that we created earlier. Wonderful. It's one commit ahead of the original repository. And we can see just a moment ago, 3 minutes ago, we added font awesome shortcode and documentation. Wonderful. So we push the changes directly to this branch. It's committed to this branch. The reason is because we have write access to this branch, right? Because it's our own forked repository. If we go into this set of commits or set of files in this commit, we can see exactly what has happened, which is great. So now what we want to do is compare and make a pull request. So the base repository is going to be the original repo, so the Red Hat Gov, redhatgov.github.io, their base docs branch, and the head repository, mine, is going to be using the branch that we created earlier that has this new code, right? Awesome. Just take that previous documentation. All right, so I've got my general pull request set up. I'm comparing the proper branches and repositories. I've got the description of this pull request. Something else I want to do is, this was in response to an issue, right? So we can actually tag that issue here as well. So this is issue number 33. And we'll go ahead and double check everything. So at this point, I like to just double check. Again, it's So make sure it's all kosher before pushing your branch or making a pull request to have the main repository pull your code into their mainline source. So let's go ahead and create that pull request. So at this point, if you have some CI bits going on, that'll start to kick off like it is in this case. It will run tests, so on and so forth. This pull request is now living in the Red Hat Gov repository, right, as a pull request. What that means is that an administrator or authorized user otherwise of this repository underneath the Red Hat Gov group will be able to check this pull request, verify it, and see if they want to pull in my new code into their mainline source, which would be great, right? Because at that point we would have just made this new feature and contributed it to an open source project. Yay! Now, on the other side of that, if this isn't already in the mainline source, how do you view it? How do you preview the changes that I have made? Great question. So what you want to do is come to the pull request and find out what repository and branch it's coming from, right? Excellent. So it's in this branch here that's already pre-selected from clicking on that link. It's in this branch in my forked version of repository. Awesome. That does not mean that it is viewable on this redhatgov.io site anywhere, right? Because this is the production version, and they can't access local host, they being the public, anyone who's trying to verify this code. So how do you preview this? What we want to do is hope that Chrome doesn't crash on you. All right, great. Let's clear out a couple things. All right, we're back to working. So now what we want to do here is basically just run a couple steps that we did earlier. Let's go into our previous working directory and make a new working directory, right? Discount double check. All right. So now we're going to pretend that we are an administrator of that main repository and we're verifying my code changes, right? So what I want to do is make sure that I'm in mine, being this new repo that I've created, that fork, and I'm going to clone it. Now from this pull request, we're using the KMRFE font awesome branch, so we'll just want to make sure to check out that branch. Great. Let's go into that newly cloned directory. I have this previous development server in the background. Let's go ahead and kill it, because you can't have two of these things listening on the same port. All right. So we've cloned it. What we need to do is check out that specific branch that I had submitted a pull request for. And what is it called? RFE font awesome. Should know that already, or at least by now. All right, so we've switched to that new branch, which is great. What we want to do now is run a test server. It's going to crunch because, again, this is brand new, so it doesn't have a cache of any sort. All right, so we have this test server running in the background. It's running at this localhost 1313. So checking out this example documentation that this guy said he submitted. Oh, hey, it's right there. Excellent. Now that is just a preview of this pull request that I've put in. That is the general flow of things. Hopefully in a little while somebody will check it out, hopefully maybe approve it, and we'll get along with another contribution to this project shortly enough. By the way, hopefully this gave a little insight into how Git works, how to clone, general setup really even before that, how to clone, then make some changes, add, commit, push, create a pull request, and a little bit of a branching strategy to kind of keep things sane. Hopefully this helps you in your open source projects. Good luck and happy programming.